Okay, welcome to your next Dagger 2 tutorial. This is the episode on scoping. So, I'm going to have to show you a little something to see how this works. What I'm going to do is, in order to show you the issue we have with Dagger at the moment, is that we've built our graph and we're getting our instances from the graph, which is great. But there's a big flaw here. Let's just do this instead. We're going to say GitHub service. So I'm going to duplicate this and say, and we're going to call these number 2. And then down here we're going to have number 3. Okay? And then we're going to log. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to put in a log statement down here so I have a breakpoint. I need to do this through the debugger for you guys to see this correctly. Actually, you know, I don't need to do it, okay? So our tag will just be tag, or it'll actually be Dagger 2 with a capital A because, you know, laziness. And we're going to say GitHub service, this one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out these instances here, okay? I'm going to duplicate this a few times. And we're going to just copy and paste in our various parts into this. So you'll notice here I'm just logging out the instances. Now one thing you'll note that by default Java will log the memory address, the name of the class plus the memory address. So if we bring up our logs, you might need to watch this in full screen. We're going to restart our app. We're going to hit OK. And once Dagger builds, you'll see what will be the problem. It'd be great when Dagger actually builds and installs. It's going to take a second. It's just installing right now. Okay. So let's take a look at our logs here. I'll actually copy out these logs so we can see them a little more clearly because this is very, very important. And we'll just put comments in front of these so we can actually see them. So here's our logs, okay? Do you notice anything? Let's take a look at the memory addresses. Each Picasso instance, so Picasso 2, okay, Picasso 2 is the instance C010A87 in memory, while Picasso 3 is 80C9DDD. Each time we call get GitHub service, it's returning a new instance of GitHub service, and the same for Picasso. This is not a good situation because this happens down the stack. So you'll notice here our Picasso module depends on OKHTTP client. Our GitHub service also depends on this. This means that when we call get GitHub service and get Picasso, we want those to share the same instance of OKHTTP client, don't we? We need them to share it because this is why we do that. Because when they share it, it aggregates things together. But they won't share them. Dagger by default will create a new instance of every dependency on each call. This becomes a big, big problem when you try to inject a view or something, and we'll see that further down the line when we do the RX MVP tutorials. So, how on earth do we fix this? Because we do not want to be creating instances all over the place. We need to tell Dagger to only create one instance of it per graph. So basically what we want to have happen is when this build method is called, any instance we get of that object should be a single instance for the whole thing. This is what a scope does. A scope essentially says this instance means I am a single instance and I belong to this component. So when you scope your dependencies, you're locking them into a component. You're basically saying like we're going to say Picasso is a GitHub application scope. And what this means is, it will basically mean that Picasso will say, I belong to the GitHub application scope and I cannot be used outside that scope, or I cannot be created outside that scope. So let's create a scope. So a scope is an annotation. It's a special annotation. We'll make it special, but we'll just create a GitHub application scope. For some reason, the new version of Studio is failing here, so I'm just going to manually do it, okay? So this is our annotation class. Add interface. Now Dagger doesn't care about this annotation. We need to tell it, Dagger, that it's a scope. It's now a scope, and we need to set retention policy. And we'll just say class, which is the default, which works fine. So now we've created our scope annotation. So let's put that on the stuff. So we need to say GitHub application scope, and we're going to scope Picasso to be part of that scope. So you add the scope to the provides method. Now what this does is when you add a scope to a provides method, it says I cannot be used outside this component. So now Picasso module and GitHub application component have become linked. You cannot use the Picasso module on any other component, because you can have multiple components. We'll get to that later. And it means only create one instance of the Picasso module, which is really, really good. The problem is our OK HTTP 3 downloader, well, we want one of those as well. Our OK HTTP client, we definitely only want one of those, so we'll add that in. And for each of those, we want one logging interceptor. And for each, we only want one cache and one file, because we don't want two files working on the same file space. That'd be bad. Our context, well, we can always provide the same context, even though in this case it is a singleton because it's a single module, but we'll just add it anyway, which is great. And we'll do the same for our retrofit module. We'll do it to JSON, we'll do it to that, we'll do it to that. Just tidy up these annotations, and now we'll run the app. So what we've done is we've told Dagger only create one instance of each of those dependencies, which is really cool. It works out really, really well for us. So now when it runs, if we look at our logs, I'll just copy them here into the code so we can see them a bit better. Check it out. Each retrofit instance, so retrofit, it's the first one here is 2408FA, the second one's 2408FA, and the third one's 2408FA. So now we've only got one instance of each module, of each dependency, which is really good. So if I actually put a breakpoint in, okay, and run the app again, this will be a little hard to see. You definitely want to look at this in large screen. We'll be able to dig through the actual dependencies, or the objects themselves. Okay, debugger. Okay, good. So let's take a look at GitHub Service 2. Retrofit. So let's take a look at side retrofit. We should see a client in here. Callback executor. Call factory is our OK HTTP client. Okay, so that's what this depends on. This is where it ends up, and it's number 4588. So let's take a look at our Picasso 2 instance. There should be a downloader in here somewhere. I'm just having a bit of trouble finding it, guys. It's a little confusing. Request handler. I need a reference queue. I need to drill down into this a little bit. File request handler resource now. I haven't actually done this before. Dispatcher. That sounds like it's promising. OK HTTP 3 downloader, and our OK HTTP client. So you'll notice here that the client 4588 is there, and it's inside our call factory. So our OK HTTP client is being used and shared between the two instances, which is really good. And it really optimizes our network. And it works out really well for us, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want. So now we essentially have an OK HTTP client shared across the two, and we can see all the logs, all the network transactions in the logs. Actually, we can't because I didn't set that up correctly because I'm stupid. Let's just jump into GitHub service, network module, logging interceptor. Okay, now we need to set up the logging interceptor a little differently here. So I'm very quickly going to set that up. Sorry, it's our logger. Set level, and then we want level dot basic so we can actually see the network transactions occurring. And I just got a message. So let's see what this outputs now. So now in our logs, you'll see the actual network transactions happen. So you'll see all the URLs appearing that link to GitHub. So if we go back to our run tab, and as you can see, our network module is logging out everything correctly. That's really cool. So that's what scoping does. Now, before I go, there's something I need to make clear. There is an annotation that is always used in tutorials called @singleton. @singleton is the worst, the most misleading, and the biggest mistake of Dagger tutorials. Do not use the singleton annotation under any circumstances. First of all, singleton is a scope. It's literally a Java scope annotation as well. It does the exact same function as this. @singleton and @a custom scope have the exact same purpose. If you use @singleton somewhere in your class, it's going to mislead because @singleton implies that this is a singleton for the entire application like a normal Java singleton, but it is not. It is only a singleton within the instance you create. So if I go here and I create one builder and build it, and then I build it a second time, I will get a different instance. Each time you call .build, you get new instances of your dependencies, whether they've got singleton on them or not. It's incredibly misleading. Don't use that singleton. Create your goddamn custom scopes. Don't be lazy. And we're using Dagger, which is essentially the definition of lazy. So please do that. Okay? And that's it for this video, guys. See you next time.